All right, good morning, everyone, and thanks, Michael, for the introduction. So I'm Yue Lin. I'm currently an assistant professor at the University of Illinois, and today I want to talk about a recent paper on posthuman cartography that I published together with Dr. Zhao from University of Washington, Seattle. And hopefully this can add to the ongoing conversation in the NACIS community in terms of how we might navigate the emerging realities of AI in mapping. So the use of generative AI in geographic and mapping applications has emerged quite a lot recently. For example, generative AI has been used to create satellite images of future flood disasters. And AI agents like MapGTP and Carto agents that you have just mentioned are also designed to use GPT and other generative AI models to understand natural language requests, call on different functional modules, and generate maps without human intervention. And this interest in generative AI in geospatial isn't just within academia. It is also expanding across industry, with companies like Google pushing their own suites of generative AI tools for geospatial reasoning and mapping. So mapping with AI, especially generative AI, has many differences from how we used to use computers in mapping. In this new process, humans define the mapping problems and provide data, but instead of explicitly encoding rules into algorithms and programs, we now rely more on the computer to learn the rules from the data and generate maps. And the map outputs may be used not just by humans, but also by the computer itself to correct or input its actions next time. So compared to our earlier mapping technologies where humans take the main, if not the only role in intelligence, with AI, we need to recognize that we may be more and more relying on the computer's ability to learn intelligence and to share parts of the decision-making process. But what else is behind this emerging new phase of computer automation in cartography powered by AI? We know that there are benefits, but is AI risk-free? So there's actually growing awareness of the potential risks of AI, like hallucinations, and how it can entrench us further into artificial realities and disconnect us from social connections. And there's also environmental impact. Increased intelligence also means increased computational demands, which leads to higher electricity use and water consumptions. And as we celebrate the automation brought by AI, is it really automated by machines? The answer is no. There's also a huge and often neglected crew of human labor involved in creating and cleaning the data that powers AI. So in the context of cartography, is there a way to better understand these impacts of AI? In this work, we propose posthuman cartography and hope to offer it as one perspective to do this and to contribute to the ongoing conversation in the cartography communities as we talk more and more about ethics and technologies. So the goal of posthuman cartography is twofold. First, we want to provide a potential way of thinking that doesn't just focus on either humans or the machine's role in cartography, but recognizes the growing potential for the coexistence of both intelligence and mapping. So in that sense, we want to offer a perspective to account for both human and non-human participation and influence in map creation and interpretation. And secondly, an important aspect of posthumanity is to revisit what defines human and to challenge the historical hierarchies that have defined humanity through race, gender, and other categories. So with that, another focus of posthuman cartography is to examine the emerging inequalities as AI becomes more involved in mapping and explore practices of care by asking questions like who or what is affected, where, and how. So posthumanity is closely related to Donna Haraway's metaphor of a cyborg, which is a hybrid of machine and human. So from there, she expresses this objection to what she calls antagonistic dualism, such as machine versus human, human versus animal, self versus other, and so on. So on one hand, posthumanity is about considering the realities of increasing interconnectedness between humans and machines. But on the other hand, it is also deeply connected with family theories and means extending our moral concerns to people and things beyond our own interest. So these are also what we try to bring into the context of cartography today. We recognize that these builds on many ideas from critical cartography, but we want to bring in posthuman thinking because AI as potential growing form of intelligence has brought us closer than ever to the cyborg. So in posthuman cartography, we see maps not just as static products, but want to decompose them into a distributed network of non-human and human actors in order to further examine their roles and influence. So this is also closely related to the non-representational theory in cartography. So here we look at non-human actors such as training sets, AI models, and the environment, as well as human actors such as data workers, AI scholars, public users, and the institutions. So this is not a comprehensive list, and I'll only be able to cover a few of these actors in this presentation, but these are some of the important actors we think matters in the process of AI involvement in mapping today. So again, we're not trying to propose a definite framework, but hopefully these can be part of a starting point to start some conversations on how to use and teach AI critically in our field. So an important non-human actor we consider in post-human cartography is the training data sets. Training set provides the data needed for AI models to learn patterns, and they largely determine what the models end up learning. So in the context of cartography, the training sets we feed into AI models are often maps. And the question becomes, what kind of maps should we use for model training? While in the scientific community, we strive to make maps that objectively represent the real world, the subjectivity and even biases in maps have long been recognized, and these needs to be carefully considered when we're selecting training data for AI. So one example of a bias map that could be harmful is the early maps of America, which largely reflects only European perspectives where indigenous lands and settlements are erased and marked as no man's land. And maps have also been well documented to contain cartographic mischief, deceptions, and propaganda. So it is important to be careful about how these problems in maps might affect what AI models learn from the training data. And besides the training data, the environment is also an important non-human actor that we consider. We know that creating intelligent machines come at a cost to the environment, and these can be pretty energy and carbon intensive. So among the most common tasks that AI performs, image generation, which is essentially what we rely on to create maps with AI, is by far the most energy and carbon intensive AI task. And it is said to consume about the same amount of energy as charging a phone each time an image is generated. So the growth of AI infrastructure is also bringing growing environment and energy cost. So even before ChatGPT, the expansion of data centers already introduced at least a 3.7% annual increase in electricity use in data infrastructure. And this environmental impact is not born equally. In Arizona, for example, as data centers increasingly dominate the power grids, it comes at the expense of many indigenous communities who are already facing disproportionate environmental burdens and long histories of marginalizations. So as we celebrate the breakthroughs that AI brings to cartography, we also need to be careful and mindful of its environmental impacts, which is not only substantial, but also often borne by people and communities who are already very vulnerable. So to the layman, AI is all robots, machines, and models. It is a technology that kills jobs. But in fact, millions of data workers are involved in producing data for AI models, especially as it becomes more common to outsource data annotation to platforms such as Temturk. And these data workers are important human actors we consider in post-human cartography. So this data workforce, however, has been largely disregarded in our narratives of AI. We often talked about data and models that support building AI models for mapping, but we rarely acknowledge the people behind it. And another question raised with data workers is that their labels become the ground truths for model training. But whose ground truth is that? A 2021 survey found that in the US, data workers on platforms like mTurk are generally young, white, and mostly women. And there have been many studies in other areas showing that these demographic differences can affect what kind of labels are being assigned to the same content. So a geospatial example is that when labeling safety from Street View images, genders tend to shape perception differently. And the maps produced based on these different safety scores are going to look differently as well, depending on whose labels are used. So with an unbalanced data workforce, some of these perspectives may be missing from the final data. And also in posthuman cartography, public users are also important human actors we consider. The growing access to AI on one hand benefits some public users, but on the other hand, there's one big concern with AI tools is their potential to amplify misinformation. So in cartography, we already have many examples where maps are being used to create mischief, propaganda, and misinformation. But with generative AI, it becomes massively easier. Just upload an image and type some prompts, and anyone can make a deepfake map in seconds. And these concerns of misuse go beyond public users to institutional efforts. From Google reversing its pledge to not use AI for weapons and surveillance earlier this year, to the growing use of AI and generative AI in military. So in many of these cases, maps are involved in combination with AI for surveillance targeting and military decision-making. So AI is on its way to our discipline. What can we do from here? One important thing we hope that the posthuman cartography can inform the community is to find a way to integrate critical AI literacy into our education. And also another important theme we may want to propose for future research in the cartography community is to consider how we may implement counter AI instead of just AI for mapping. So an important theme in critical cartography is how technologies and maps are being used to empower people. So with AI, there have been some explorations of how it can be people-powered and be used for decision-making in a geospatial context. And there are also community explorations of creating this rich creative context for counter mapping platforms, like currying the maps with generative AI. So a potential direction for creating counter AI is to potentially reimagine the role of maps in the training and design of AI systems, not just as something come from authority, but as vital forms of bottom-up expressions created by communities and these marginalized groups. For example, we have seen these dynamic maps in feminist cartography and also for mapping refugee border crossing experiences, and also, for example, visualizing narratives of displacements and resistance. So being able to integrate these deep maps with greater information than the 2D maps into the training and design of AI systems might be an important step towards developing what we call counter AI, where AI can be used to empower communities rather than overlook or erase them. So here's the annals paper we published on posthuman cartography earlier this year. Feel free to scan this QR code and give it a read. And thank you all for listening. I welcome any questions, but I think I'm running out of time. So if there are, okay, so I can take one question. So if there's any question, I'm happy to take it. Yeah, I think posthumanity is essentially closely related to feminism. And so that's one of the reasons why I intentionally integrate those examples in the presentation and also in the article. So I think, so when we talk about posthumanism and posthumanity, it's also under this big umbrella of critical cartography in the context of cartography. And so when we think about critical cartography, we also integrate a lot of examples, like you said, from indigenous mapping and also Black mapping, feminist mapping. So because an important aspect of posthumanity is to extend beyond ourselves, extend the care beyond ourselves, to empower marginalized communities. So it's not just about the coexistence between human and AI. So we want to also integrate that perspectives into this framework or this, this kind of idea. So that's a very important part of posthuman cartography. And again, we just intentionally integrate those concepts and examples in this work and also in the paper. So yeah.